Okay, children, so we are now in the last leg of this chapter, Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. For the past few weeks, we have been focusing on the Russian Revolution. We studied about the rise of Lenin and the Bolshevik party in power in Russia and the various kind of reforms that Lenin introduced to make Russia a socialist society. Okay, and of course many of his measures were appreciated, but his other measures were also criticized by the people and the various parties that were there. Okay, and Lenin had formed USSR with an opinion to bring all the non-Russian nationalities also under the same umbrella of the Bolshevik party, but we know that it wasn't really a successful attempt. Anyways, now in this video today, we are going to look into the rise of a new leader, Stalin, and his new policy of collectivization. And the last topic would be the global influence of Russian Revolution and the worldview of Russia. Okay, now who was Stalin? So Lenin, who was leading the Bolshevik party for all these years, he died on 21st January 1921. And after that, the leadership fell on the soldiers of Stalin. Okay, so Joseph Stalin was now the new leader that was now going to lead the Bolshevik party. Okay, so it is under his rule, we can say. How did the Bolshevik party rule in Russia, or what were the different kind of measures introduced by Stalin now as a leader of the Bolshevik party? So that will be our focus today. So Stalin was also a very strong and a very promising leader. So he introduced many agricultural reforms. Now, a collectivization of agriculture, that is the topic today. So, from 1927 to 1928, the Soviet Russia, it started to face an acute problem of supply of food grains. All right. So, Soviet Russia ma food grains ko supply ko problem bhayo. Okay, to curb this problem, to solve this problem, the government le ke garyo, prices ke गरिदियो fix गरिदियो. All right, so the prices of the food grains were now fixed by the government. Peasants were forced to sell the grains at the fixed prices by the government. Okay, but in many areas the peasants, they refused to sell the grains at the prices fixed by the government. All right, hence Lenin, he undertook many emergency measures. He took a very strong emergency measures to tackle with this problem. All right, so Stalin ko opinion चाहिँ के थियो भन्दाखेरि, he believed that the rich peasants who are there in the countryside and the traders who are dealing with this trade of grains especially, they have been hoarding the supplies. Okay, that means उनीहरूले ग्रेन्सलाई चाहिँ के गर्यो, होर्ड गरेर कहीँनिर थुपारेर राखिरहेको छ, so that when the prices of the grains are higher, okay, then at that time they can sell the grains at profit. Okay, so keeping this opinion in his mind, he felt that now, okay, the supplies has to be confiscated. Okay, so he knew that अब यो जुन चाहिँ होर्ड गरेर राखेको छ यिनीहरूले कहीँनिर चाहिँ यो peasants and traders चाहिँ यो पक्का पनि के गरेछ, सप्लाईलाई थुपारेर राखेको छ. Okay, so now he felt that यो जुन जति पनि supplies छ, he has to confiscate, he has to capture this supplies. So because he had this doubt in his mind, he adopted many measures to deal with this. All right, so let's see now what were the measures adopted by Stalin. Okay, the first thing, 1928 March, Stalin began to send his party members, okay, to the grain producing areas. That means the Bolshevik party members, they began to go and tour all these areas where grains were being produced. Okay, now they began to supervise and enforce the grain collection. Okay, that means उनीहरूले सबै supervision गर्नु था. They started to see the grain producing areas मै गएर they started to see what grains is being produced, how much grain is produced. Okay, and even the collection of grains were now done by the party members. So even after the party members were supervising all these things, the shortages of grain still continued to be there. All right, र त्यो problem हुँदाखेरि चाहिँ now these party members, they even raided the kulaks and suggested collective farms, kolkos, when the shortages still continued. All right, now there are two new terms that is introduced here. One is the kulaks and the other one is kolkos. Now this can be asked in a 1 marks question. Who are the kulaks? So basically kulaks भनेको चाहिँ they were the rich peasants in Russia. Okay, so peasants, the rich peasants in Russia, they were called the kulaks. Okay, and kolkos bhaneko चाहिँ collective farms. Okay, now the Bolsheviks were of the opinion that the grain shortages is taking place because of the small land holdings. Okay, now small land holdings bhaneko सानो सानो जमिन छ सबैजनाको. Okay, and because of that के हुँदैछ, grain shortages हुँदैछ. That was the opinion of the Bolsheviks. Okay, so after 1917 the peasants were given a lot of small lands. Okay, if you remember, Bolsheviks peasants हरूलाई सानो landsहरू दिएको थियो. Alright, redistribution भएको थियो lands को हैन. So 1917 को बादमा the peasants were given small lands. Okay, but now they were feeling that these small sized lands of the peasants, they were not modernized. Okay, the small land holdings peasants त्यसमा उनीहरूले modern tools apply गर्न सकेको छैन. Did you understand? And because of this के भएको छैन, production has not become better. Because of this reason, okay, because of the absence of modernized tools, the peasants were not able to produce grains on large quantities. Okay, and that is why there was grain shortages being felt in Russia. Hence, to establish modern farms, the kulaks had to be eliminated. Alright, so उनीहरूले के भने now modern farm establish गर्नुपर्छ र modern farms establish गर्नको लागि चाहिँ first thing जुन चाहिँ यो kulaks को system छ, okay, the rich peasants having the land, this should be removed. Okay, the kulaks have to be removed. Alright, and therefore they took away the land from the peasants. Okay, all the small peasants ko lands it was taken away, and all these lands were now combined. Okay, and उनीहरूले एउटा large farms के गर्यो establish गर्यो, which was now under the control of the state. Alright, so modern farms were established by eliminating the kulaks and by taking away the land from the peasants. Okay, and after the lands were confiscated and taken from all these kulaks and small peasants, these lands were now combined, okay, and made large farms. Okay, and it was established under the control of the state. So now, after the establishment of this large farms under the control of the state government, Stalin now introduced a collectivization program. So from 1929, peasants were forced to cultivate in these collective farms. Okay, all this land, the implements that are used in agriculture, okay, they were now under the ownership of the collective farms. That means land abo individual property होइन. Okay, even the implements that were used in the farms, है, जुन चाहिँ farms मा used in implementsहरू हुन्छ है, toolsहरू हुन्छ, even now that was under the ownership of collective farms. Okay, and all these peasants who were working in these collective farms, they were to share the kolkos profits. Okay, kolkos bhaneko again the collective farms. Alright, so these collective farms, but now whatever profit that they gain, that was shared with the peasants. Alright, now if you see, there is a picture given below. Okay, so a lot of women have gathered here with their implements. Okay, so they are all now ready to work in kolkos. Now we must understand that many of these peasants, they were not very willing to work in the collective farms. They were better off in the individual farms. Alright, finally unale land paeko थियो, so that they were happy with that small land holdings. But now under the Stalin's government, these peasants were forced to work in the kolkos. Okay, again kolkos bhaneko के हो? It is the collective farms. So now a lot of peasants, as I said, they were not happy. There was a resistance against the collectivization program. Yo program ko against ma unale thupro ke garyo resistance garyo. They raised their voice against the collectivization program. Okay, so angered peasants they resisted and they destroyed the livestock. Okay, livestock whatever cattles they had. Okay, all of that was destroyed. So from the period from 1929 to 1931, we see that the cattle, okay, the population of the cattle, it fell by 1/3. Okay, because a lot of livestock destroy गरिदियो. All right, so to destroy गरिँदाखेरि the the population, the number of the cattle it was reduced by 1/3. Of course, those who were resisting, all those people who resisted the collectivization, they were severely punished. Many of them were deported and exiled. That means they were thrown out of the country. Okay, they were sent out of the country, they were driven out of the country. So Stalin's government, later on, the peasants, they said that it is not, they were not against the government. Okay, it is just that they did not want to work in the collectivized farms. Okay, so Stalin's government later on, intervened in cultivation, allow gare to some peasants. Okay, but the cultivators who were working independently in the independent farms, they were treated very unsympathetically. That means heavy land revenues were imposed on them. Okay, so they were given very very harsh treatment. Okay, but what we see is now collectivization program was introduced to increase the production of food grains. Okay, but despite of this collectivization program, the production did not increase immediately. In fact, the bad harvest of 1930 to 1933 led to one of the most devastating famines in the Soviet history, when over 4 million people died. Okay, so you can see that collectivization program was not at all successful. Okay, in fact, the time during which collectivization program was introduced, 1930 to 1933, harvest was so bad that there were famines and there were shortages of food felt everywhere. Okay, and because of which 4 million people, they were perished because of this famine situation in Soviet. Now, because of this failure of the collectivization program, the party members, they began to criticize Stalin. Okay, so Stalin पनि अब criticize गर्नु थाल्यो because the collectivization program was a big failure. Okay, however, Stalin, they charged these critics as conspiracy against the socialism. Okay, all those people who criticized him, even his own party members who criticized him, they were charged of hailing a conspiracy against socialism. 2 million people were accused and sent to prison or the labor camps. All right, people were forced to make false confessions and even executed. So this is what we see. Okay, 1920s ko end ma Russia was facing a lot of shortages of food grains. Okay, inadequate agriculture थियो, shortage of food grains was felt. Okay, after which in 1927 the peasants were forced to work in kolkhoz, that is collective farm ma सबैजनालाई काम गर्नु force लगायो. Okay, 1930 ma the peasants, they were not really happy with the collective farms. They were not ready to or they were not willing to work in the kolkhoz. Hence there was a lot of uprising. Peasants farms were burned गरिदियो, they destroyed their livestock. All right, and there were a lot of disturbances that happened. Okay, peasants were punished for going against the collectivization program. 1931 when collectivization program was a big failure, the party members, they began to criticize Stalin and his collectivization program. So all those people who went against Stalin, they were accused of going against socialism. All right, so many people were arrested and they were sent to these labor camps, and some were even executed. So this is what was happening in Russia during the rule of Stalin. Now we come to the last topic, that is the global influence of Russia. So we know that Russia, things were not very very good, but the changes that were taking place in Russia, it was able to bring some kind of influence in the rest of the world. Okay, now the first thing was that in Russia, the workers party was formed. The workers union were very very strong. They were able to overthrow the old system and bring in a lot of changes. So this possibility of workers state Okay, it inspired many countries across the globe. Many people, many countries, they were inspired by the Russian Revolution. Okay, they were inspired by how the workers, had come together to form a worker state in Russia. Okay, so workers are पनि मिलेर यसरी changes ल्याउन सक्दो रहेछ, they can also form the government. This kind of possibility, was created because of the Russian revolution, and this is what inspired many countries across the world. In fact, in many countries, communist parties were formed. For example, in Great Britain, the Communist Party of Great Britain was formed. All right. Spread of socialism by the Bolsheviks, they inspired colonial countries. Okay, many countries that were colonies, that were under the colonial government, colonial rule, they were inspired by the spread of socialism, okay, under the Bolsheviks. Okay, they were inspired by the ideas of socialism. They were inspired by how Bolsheviks were making an effort to establish, a socialist society in Russia. Okay, so कतिवटा colonial countries who were trying to get their freedom, they were very much inspired by the spread of socialism in Russia. And the Bolsheviks also, they held many international conferences, like the Conference of East was held in 1920, where even the non-Russian countries ले पनि यसमा participate गर्नु पायो. Okay, and the Bolsheviks also founded a Comintern, the International Union of Pro-Bolshevik Socialist Party. Okay, so जो चाहिँ Bolshevik Socialist Party को supportersहरू छ उनीहरूको लागि an international union was also formed. Okay, a Comintern was also founded by the Bolsheviks. Many of our leaders from across the globe, they went to Russia to receive education in the USSR communist universities of workers of the East. All right, and by the time of the outbreak of the Second World War, we can see that USSR had given socialism a global face and a world stature. Okay, so they were able to give this idea or project the idea of socialism to the rest of the world and inspire many countries in the process. But we know the reality, right? Things were not as good as in Russia as it was seen from outside. Okay, by 1950s, slowly the world began to realize that the socialist movement in Russia was not really up to the mark. That means, socialist ideas were something else. Okay, the socialist ideas of philosophy, it was very different from what was actually happening inside Russia. Okay, so 1950s now, when the world came to know what was really happening in Russia, they felt that okay, it was not going hand to hand. Okay, the socialist movement and the socialist idea, there is a lot of gap. Okay, whatever changes or developments that were taking place in Russia in the name of socialism, it was not up to the mark. Okay, a backward country had now become a great power. Okay, but it had denied political freedom to its people, and the Bolshevik government had used many repressive policies to rule the country. Okay, so by the end of the 20th century, the international reputation of USSR as a socialist country had declined. Okay, but of course, the revolution of Russia, okay, and the socialist ideas, it inspired different countries, and many countries adopted the socialist ideas, but in their own ways. So with that, we come to the end of the chapter.